Revival and Reformation. Nahor's 12 Sons, A Lesson on Living in God's Promises by anonymous author. A weird detail appears at the end of Genesis 22. After Abraham nearly sacrifices his son Isaac, he hears the news that his brother Nahor has 12 sons of his own, 8 with his wife Milcah, 4 with his concubine Reumah. What a contrast! Abraham has just nearly lost his one and only son, while Nahor has 12. I wonder how Abraham felt at receiving this news from afar after his journey with Isaac. God has just providentially intervened in saving Isaac's life on Mount Moriah, but Abraham probably still wondered how God would fulfill his promise. Quote, "I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is upon the seashore." End quote. Surely he noticed a wide difference between that promise and his present reality as he settled back into his tent in Beersheba. Just looking at the facts. If I had been an outside observer of Abraham and Nahor's families, I would have assumed that Nahor and his 12 sons would be the fulfillers of God's covenantal promise. There were so many of them, while Isaac seems to have barely made it off the mountain alive with Abraham. The author of Genesis himself acknowledges the contrast between the two brothers' families in describing Abram's marriage with Sarai and Nahor's marriage with Milcah in Genesis 11. Quote, "But Sarai was barren, she had no child." End quote. The author ends the genealogy abruptly there. The story of Genesis 22 teaches me that it is by faith, not by number or appearance, that God fulfills his covenant. Today, you and I can count ourselves Abraham's descendants, along with millions of others throughout history who have accepted God's promise of salvation by faith. God's promises, all of them, are true. A comparison. And do not miss the strangeness and poetry of this. 2 generations later, Jacob becomes the father of 12 male children. 8 are with his wives Leah and Rachel, 4 are with his concubines Bilhah and Zilpah. Remember Nahor? He also had 12 sons, 8 with his wife, 4 with his concubine. However, the scripture talks about Jacob's 12 sons in a very different way than it does Nahor's 12 sons. From Genesis to Revelation, Jacob's sons, Abraham's grandsons, appear innumerable times in the canon of scripture. They settle in the promised land of Canaan, they found the tribes of Israel, the identities of every Jewish individual were connected to them. Jesus himself descended from them. For centuries, Christians and Jews have talked about Jacob's sons. Even in heaven, the 12 gates have, quote, "the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel." End quote. Talk about a lasting legacy. Nahor also has a place in the sacred genealogy, but primarily through his female descendants, Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel, who marry into Abraham's genealogical line. For one reason or another, Nahor's 12 sons receive little mention throughout the Bible. Complete trust no matter the circumstances. We are called to fully trust God and his words, trust his promises. Our trust is not based on what we can see and count, not based on what we can do or understand, not based on what would make sense to our minds, but based rather on God's faithfulness. He always keeps his promises. God does not lie. His promises are absolutely secure, and they never go wrong or remain unfulfilled. Consider what God has asked us to accept based on faith rather than on our current realities. Are you and I living in his promises rather than counting our sons in the present? For bibliographical and biblical references on this article, and for so much more content for pastors and church leaders, please visit ministrymagazine.org.